Welcome everybody. Appreciate your time and energies in learning a little bit about how Critter Guard goes about animal prevention. Um, the title is An Ounce of Prevention Worth a Pound to Cure. Uh, Pretty similar to what my predecessor just went through. In a way, you're trying to convince your utilities and operations, something's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And so, what in our case, we're decidedly less technical than what you just experienced, but nonetheless, the damage that occurs can be catastrophic with one of these furry little problem children. So, I'll start with a bit of an introduction. Basically, squirrels and birds are what we're going to talk about because they are number one and number two in animal related power outages. That's documented many, many times, but and I suppose it's somewhat regionally consistent, although I've been to 50 countries around the world for extended periods over my working career, and I can tell you squirrels are everywhere. Um, so the damage they do is just curious, curious little excursions they make. But if they happen to make a bridge, you can see some pretty catastrophic events, and nobody wants that. So the point is, these things are going to happen, and what can you do to mitigate it? Critter Guard's been around about 20 years. Actually, a little more than that. I think we started 2001. I actually bought the company in 2016, but I've known the original owners. They got to be high 90s and retired and sold the business. And so we've taken it from there, and we've really gone around the world with it. So we're a very successful company, and it's a unique product. When you think about animal mitigation, the way our approach is considerably different than most. And I put up the picture of Alfred E. Newman there. Anybody that's close to my age, you may recognize what's called the Mad magazine, something that was a U.S. based kind of tongue-in-cheek magazine, and that was sort of his favorite expression with Alfred E. Newman was, "What, me worry? Nah." That's kind of the way the utilities seem to treat animal mitigation. They know it's going to happen. There are going to be problems, but they sometimes wait until the catastrophic occurs to do something about it. So hopefully this presentation will spur some ideas how you can do that proactively. So a little bit more about Critter Guard. Like I say, we were privately owned. We started in 2001 in Columbia. We're involved in a lot of different sectors, but power and communication utilities tend to be our largest customers and most relevant. But we sell also to private business. We sell to residential homeowners to keep squirrels off their roof, off their gutters, and things like that. We ship around the world. We've got a very efficient supply chain. We try to keep most of the products in stock all the time, so our customers are not having to carry stock. We carry it for them. And so, by all means, if you got issues that way, just let us know. So some definitions we'll use to this presentation, just kind of keywords more than anything else. I'll use the proactive is the key point of this presentation. Trying to control the situation before it's occurred, because again, it's going to, you just don't know when. Also, our concept of animal guards is not so much guards, we call them barriers. Yes, the company name is Critter Guard, and our key product is Line Guard, but they're really barriers. They're blockades on the highway. That highway we'll talk about. A guard or a cover is what you're going to see from most of the other typical animal mitigation firms. They cover the device. But as you'll see, that doesn't actually stop anybody from getting access to that device, because that can also create some other problems as well when it just covers the device. Our whole approach is to keep them from getting access to it in the first place. So we talk about a reaction. These products that you see on screen They're not necessarily competitors to us, but they all serve the same role, and that is to cover or shield the specific energized device so that if a squirrel or relevant animal approaches it, he's not going to touch the energized member. But that creates other issues because in the case of the kind of ubiquitous bushing guards, they're on the far right screen in the lower corner there. Those bushing guards are offered by a number of different suppliers. Pretty much everybody has them in the utility world. But we've heard from a number of utilities that have come back to us after the fact and said, yeah, we've got dozens or hundreds of these things deployed, but turns out that they overlap each other in a lot of our substations, and it creates a wonderful little nesting place for birds right behind it because now the bird feels sheltered and protected. So that's always something to think about when you're looking at these other guards. Creates many other questions as well. Which one am I supposed to use? Where? It's got to be the right size, the right voltage rating. How many times am I going to have to take it off and do thermography? Is there standard maintenance that has to be performed for either weather or voltage or UV aging or things like that? Is it actually going to stop the animals that I'm concerned about or just squirrels? All of those things are relevant questions when looking at a standard animal guard. And as we talked about, some guards can actually they stop one problem but create another one. A good example of that is bird spikes. We have a lot of utilities that use the bird spikes, and some of them get along just perfectly fine. But in other cases, you go back later and you can find this wonderful bird's nest nestled in the bird spikes because the spikes created a wonderful place for the bird to build their nest while repelling other animals. So the bird said, thank you very much. And so those things need to be addressed as well with these other guards. With Critter Guard, we're distinctly different. We block the access rather than cover the device. So what does that mean? How does that work? Well, the first question there is the main one. What's common among all these different devices, whether they're transformers or reactors or reclosers or switches, any number of things? Bottom line, they're all connected through a conductor of some voltage rating of some size. That conductor is the highway. That's what the crawling animals, and again, we talk about squirrels, but it could be literally any kind of animal: rats, mice, chipmunks, opossums, raccoons. In international countries, in eco preserves, government protected land, you'll have protected species. Those could be monkeys, those could be sloths, or other types of specialized devices, specialized animals. And if a utility damages one of those animals through no fault of their own, they're subject to significant penalty. So we treat all of those conductors as a highway. And if we block the highway, the animal just can't even get close. So there's no risk whatsoever. The other highway we talk about is the power pole. The power pole is a highway from the ground up to whatever's mounted on top of the pole. So in effect, you're creating basically an overhead virtual fence with the Critter Guard products. So specifically, our main product, and we've got a number of iterations of these now over the years, but Line Guard is a near universal solution for overhead assets. So notwithstanding, some very persnickety utilities, but for the most part, anything less than about 77,000 volts, we've got Line Guard in working. in those areas on those lines. We don't care what size the cable is for the most part. We don't care what voltage rating it is. We only care that the implementation of the product is between where the animal comes on the line and the asset on the line, because that's where the blockade is. So our design is one that moves. It doesn't move by default. It only moves when the animal engages with it. But because it moves or spins, it creates an unstableness for that animal. He can't figure out what's going on. It blocks his forward progress. So as we mentioned, you can use this just about anywhere on any voltage line and block the access that all these animals, including snakes. Duke actually taught me that. Duke Energy is a big user of this product. And they said, yeah, we use our pole guard product because when it's flooding season, where do the snakes go? The snakes go looking for eggs. So they'll crawl to the top of the poles and look for eggs and undoubtedly get in all kinds of problems electrically. So our pole guard product stops that. They can't get by it. So I'm going to switch here to a window in the presentation. You'll see this linked, but on this, I don't do it that way. Is that showing, Randy?
Yeah, I see the link there, but I don't see the video.
Oh, well, I got to go back and share it. Sorry. I always do that wrong. I got to find the right window now. Where is the window? Oh, here. I need a new share, and I need to share this one. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay, very good. So we'll just catch this in progress. This is a homeowner's installation on a triplex line, low voltage service entrance cable. But you can see this, we call it a squirrel, but it's probably more like a rat. If you notice, the tail is not a fluffy tail. So that's probably just a big rat. But as they come on the line, drop off a tree, climb up a pole, whatever they do to get on the line, they will approach the outside wheel and try to get over it. And their weight turns the animal upside down. And he's like, well, how do I do this? And so he's trying to figure it out. And if he gets really ambitious, as you see there, he might say, all right, screw this, I'll just jump it. And so when he tries to jump, each of those rollers are independent. They're not a connected set of rollers. They're all independent. They can all spin independently, and they're a hard shell, smooth surface. So the claws or whatever mechanism he wants to use to try to hang on, he can't really find anything to hang on, especially when he jumps. And that's the reason for the outside wheels, to make them jump and then to spin them off. So it's kind of a two-step process. It gets clamped to the line, so it stays there forever. It never has to be removed. It never has to be serviced. We've got some of these in service well over 20 years, and they still look like this one does today. Okay, so we'll stop that, go back to the presentation. Now, did we do that? Or do I have to share that again?
No, you have to share it again.
Okay, well,
I just see the black screen. Okay, you're back.
there we go. Make sure I might have skipped one there. Yeah, so I did. So, okay, so you can use line guard, as I mentioned, pretty much on any overhead conductor. Obviously, single phase lines, 3-phase lines, ground wires. We recommend for most utilities all the sub feeder lines. So the subs are always wonderful places for animals because they usually have some remote or rural area around it, lots of trees. And so it's easy for the animals to get on the line, and they default to going on the overhead lines because they're free from predators up there. So that's the reason they're crawling up the poles and the trees to drop on the lines, is because they can avoid any predators. And so we just basically say, install it anywhere between where the critter would get on the line and the device you want to protect. In the case of a sub, it would be outside the vertical line that the fence around the sub creates. So that if they get knocked off the line guard system, they're dropping outside the fence, not inside the fence. We also have options for hotline installs. A number of utilities install it hot anyway, but depending on your safety precautions and your particular linemen that are involved, some of those guys don't like dealing with hot lines. Completely understand. So we have these hotline clamps. You can use a hot stick when with the proper gloves for the right voltage. They just snap around the rollers, just snap around the lines, and the wheels also. They just slide right over it. So the securing it to the line is where the tediousness comes in with our standard system. So we've introduced a new system this year. That's the line guard for triplex. And it's not so much that it's just for triplex, it's that we just see this a lot. And we've introduced this new clamp. You can see it on the left-hand picture. That clamp is just a big, large C clamp, but we had this specially made because we couldn't find a clamp that had a smooth face. Everything had protruding edges or profiles on the end, and it would literally catch on the side of the roller, and therefore the roller wouldn't spin freely. And that's the whole trick, is that roller must spin freely. And so that's the reason for how that roller and wheel mentality works. Okay, the next product we'll talk about is a pole guard. Pole guard is used on overhead poles, power poles, because they're also the highway. They're a highway from the ground up to the overhead asset. And again, we simply block the highway. The pole guard system is two rigid plates that surround the pole. They're fixed diameter, but because most poles taper as they get higher in the air, it's usually pretty easy to find a place to mount it that's 12 inches in diameter. So that pole, wherever it's 12 inches in diameter, the pole guard will fit it perfectly. And we have some other options in case it doesn't fit perfectly, but for the most part, we get along really well with that. Those two plates get mounted to the pole. We have a couple of different mechanisms to mount based on whether it's a wooden pole or whether it's a steel or a concrete pole. Both are acceptable and can be worked. And then once those plates are in place, they're very sturdy. They're made out of the same material that brake pads are for cars, so they handle a lot of weight. And then the rollers, the same rollers you saw in the previous video, those rollers are also used on pole guard. And so it creates a mechanism where the squirrels just can't get past it. So again, another video here. I'll switch to that. Give me just a moment. There we go. And we'll share this one. And that's here. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. Randy, is that a yes?
Yes, I can see it. Video's good.
Okay, so this is a video not of a power pole, but of a pecan tree. Just as tempting for a squirrel to want to try to climb that pole, if you will. In this case, the tree was young enough that I was able to get this done, and the squirrel behaved. The reason it's on a tree as opposed to a power pole is we haven't been able to find squirrels that are good actors. So they don't stick around very long when they see pole guard. But this was my backyard a number of years ago. He behaved very well for the camera. So you can see that squirrel can't get by it. He's tried all the way around it. He's gone up multiple times. He keeps attempting it. This particular squirrel didn't work his way to the outside, but some of them will work their way to the outside and try to grab that roller from underneath. And as they grab it, it spins on those hangers. Same problem. They can't grab on it. They can't get over it. And so they finally give up and go away. So that's the basic concept of pole guard in action. back to here, new share. Okay. Oh, let me shut that off. I didn't do that. Okay, we're back to the presentation. Can you see that?
No, we're at the video. Okay, no, sorry, this is your presentation. It's fine.
You see a pole there and some guy wires. So it's another example of how pole guard and line guard can be worked in unison. In this case, kind of a unique thing. This is a water utility, and they had serious problems here. You notice they put line guard on the guy wires. Normally, we would think a horizontal wire, but in this case, whatever slope those are, maybe 30 degrees, and you're looking at line guard mounted over or above the traditional guy guards that are like a split loom. The challenge with long rollers like guy guards is if there's any friction on the line at all, even a loose wire, that long loom won't spin, which is exactly what was happening here. When they put line guard on those guy wires, that stopped that path. And then they also put pole guard on the wooden pole. And this was a situation that this utility had problems with for, I think, probably 4 years in a row every spring. And this solved the problem. They haven't had a problem since. So some iterations of pole guard, you can see these are not even wooden poles. These are steel and or concrete. And it's the same system. We've just changed the mounting mechanism on the concrete pole. We use tension bands, very similar to what utilities will use to hang street signs and other signage or even traffic lights on steel poles. So they'll hold a lot of weight, easy to put on. And so that's how that works on different types of poles. And then I show kind of a special case if you've got risers next to those poles. These have to be sort of custom engineered. It's not, you're not going to buy this off the shelf, but we'd like to confirm this spacing with you. But you can see that we can block the riser as well. And so it's took a little bit of creativity to figure that out, but it works very well. I've had it in service for a couple of years now. Pole guard can be used again on most every type of power pole that's round. If it's a square profile, rectangular profile, it might be able to be done, but please contact us if you have that situation. In some cases it will work, and in other cases it won't. The ideal mounting height is where the diameter is 12 inches, or if you know, for those that love math or geometry, that's 38 inches in circumference. We sell a optional flex tube, which is just a simple piece of conduit, but it wraps around the pole. So if you have a smaller pole, let's say maybe 9 or 10 inches, and you had a gap of an inch or two all the way around the pole guard plates, that wouldn't necessarily stop a squirrel or a snake. Whereas you see the close-up picture, that flex tube will stop it. So that's how we deal with the crawling critters, if you will. So I will switch gears and talk a little bit about birds. Birds, as we saw earlier, are the number 2 cause of problems. They're a little funnier to deal with than critters. Critters all seem to have a similar behavior, regardless of whether it's a squirrel, a rat, a mouse, or whatever. They behave pretty similarly on an overhead line. Birds, and those of you who have to deal with them, may know they don't. Depending on the type of bird, the size of bird, their behavior is all over the map. So the bird solution takes a little bit of discussion and understanding to make sure that we're all on the same page of whether or not it can work. But our system is very unique. It's not a mechanical diverter. So we're not setting up spikes, we're not setting up blockades, we're not setting up, cages to cover devices. We're literally trying to keep the birds out of the area. And so we do that by smell. This smell has been specifically developed because all egg laying species, I think the fancy technical word is oviparous. Any species that lays eggs, not including snakes, I found out, any species that flies and lays eggs, I should say, is susceptible to this scent. They don't like it. It irritates their nasal passages and they will move on. So it will work on a lot of different bird species, and we've seen it work on many different bird species. But there are some tricks about installation that we need to be careful about because small birds have small nostrils. Large birds have large nostrils. So when a large bird inhales, they get a big whiff of it all at once and it chases them away. Small birds apparently don't inhale very much. And so you have to have a very densely populated scent for it to be as effective. So just some tricks that we've learned. So it does create sort of like a vapor barrier. The birds don't like it. It won't stop them from landing. They may, if they've been there before, if they've nested there before, they likely will come back. But what you want to do is clean that area out, remove evidence of their previous habitation, then hang these bags or blocks up around the area. And it has a timed release. We've developed this scent so that it lasts, as opposed to a day or a night, like with foggers. They might work, but they might not work tomorrow. And so with this material, it'll last for weeks or even months, depending on the formulation. And so we've had good success with that. Even if it rains on it, the scent is strong enough to make the birds not come back. And in fact, we've recognized and seen the birds when they try to come back, they recognize the source of the irritation. They'll literally fly at these bags and try to knock them down from maybe, we have a lot of customers that hang them in the rafters of a maintenance depot or a shed or an airport hangar, things like that, where they're problematic and crap all over everything down below. So once you hang these up, then the birds can't knock them down, and they ultimately leave the area. We've seen effectiveness usually in the first day or two after hanging it up, and usually after about a week, the birds are gone. So we've used bird block in a lot of different places: substations, overhead lines, cross arms, generator stations, depots and warehouses. I mentioned, a hangar for multiple airports use it, service garages, any place where they're just a nuisance. They're flying in, and it can just be problematic depending on the area. Couple of examples here. Both of these were, well, the generation station on the left, this is a massive nuclear generator on the East Coast. They had problems where the birds would fly into these bunkers, and those are large gas-filled phase connections up there, I think 750 kV. And the birds would roost along there, and of course the bird poop would be in an area where it would leach in and create potential shortages. Obviously, the control cabinet down below was problematic. They'd crap on that. You can see on the right-hand side, similarly, another outdoor substation. This was a live substation at the time of implementation. They couldn't shut it down because, again, it's a generation station. So we had to sort of get, creative about what density do we think we need. And you see multiple bags hanging together. That's because we couldn't hang them close enough to what we recommended. And they wanted to protect that transformer, which the birds would light. You see the phase conductor, the phase bushings directly above the transformer. The birds would nest behind that and then crap on the transformer, on the control cabinets and transformer cabinets down below. And they had all sorts of risk associated with that. So that implementation stopped that problem. and they've never had any birds come back since. So in summary, critter guard, our whole discussion is really an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's the cheapest insurance you're ever going to buy as it relates to animal mitigation. So we say, don't wait for the next squirrel attack because you know it's coming. Our approach is distinctly different. We don't go about this the same way that most others in the industry do. We literally are putting barriers on the highway that block the animal from getting to where they want to go. They're attracted to the buzzing and the warmth and the and just being away from predators. And so if we stop them from getting where they want to go, that's a whole lot easier than trying to cover that device, especially when you've got to go back and maintain that cover, whether for whatever normal maintenance you have to do. So all of these products are zero maintenance. There's you never have to go back and deal with it again. We've had them in service for well over 20 years with no issues. And so we just need more and more and more lines. So with that, I thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it back to Randy.
Great. Thanks very much, John. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Okay. Is there any statistic available of outages from animal intrusion contact with energized equipment?
Yeah, there are lots of these over the years. There was a blackout tracker that Eaton used to do. They've since stopped doing it, so it's no longer updated. But a lot of that data is still out there. The American Public Power Institute does this for their member utilities across the country. And so that data is there. And because of all this data that's out there, and because Critter Guard is pretty well recognized in a lot of the major utilities for what we do, we started offering our own curated statistics. So on our website at www.critterguard.org, you can, I don't have the link right in front of me, but you can browse our website and look at the statistics. And there are everything from actual statistics broken down by the type of animal causing that problem to anecdotal stories about utilities that have made the news. Maybe they didn't want to be in the news, but they made it anyway because of this outage. So you can see a lot of different things. Again, all these different animal stories. Many people are familiar with the bird stories because the U.S. Fish and Game Wildlife Division is pretty heavy-handed with bird outages. Almost irrespective of the bird, it seems like any type of bird, no matter what nuisance it is, can become a protected species with government regulation. And so you have to be very careful to not create bird problems. And we've had some of those. One of our utilities told us that, yeah, before we found Critter Guard, we actually built dummy poles, fake power poles for our ospreys because they were nesting in our high voltage overhead lines, and we had to get them out of there, but we couldn't touch them because they're protected. So we tried to enhance or entice them to move. So we built them new homes on fake poles all around the property and then hoped that they would move. Well, some did, but the bigger problem over time, the relevant engineer told me this, we spent well over 6 figures in creating these new power poles, maybe almost 7 figures. And all we did was create new housing for new birds. It attracted so many more ospreys to fly in that it wasn't worth the trouble. So then they started putting up bird block, and that stopped that problem. So sometimes you can outsmart yourself thinking about how to solve these problems. But yeah, there's lots of data for that. And from what I can tell, it's not really changing. The frequencies go up and down, but utilities have not really gotten the message. Hence, our point is that it's better to do this proactively because you know it's going to happen rather than to wait for it to occur because that failed occurrence, whatever it is going to be tens or hundreds or even millions of dollars in failure recovery costs. And you're not going to spend a fraction of that with CreditGuard.
Right. Next question. Are those barriers rated below extreme temperature that don't easily crack?
Yeah, good question. I'll answer it anecdotally to start with. We have customers in 6 continents, including Canada, including for the Canadian military. Every place they have a substation, they have line guard. And so for years, it's been proven to survive in cold weather conditions. Technically, the material is formulated specifically for that reason. We do notched izod impact tests on the raw material. It's designed to be quote unquote unbreakable. So that we make sure it's not brittle. We also make sure it's got the smooth gray finish. Gray was designed and specified by the utilities years ago because they didn't like red. We thought red would be a good color because it would deter animals. Turns out it didn't, and the utilities hated it. Gray is the most unobtrusive color, and that's why it's gray.
Okay, that's good. Next comment is thank you for the wonderful presentation. Can this device be used to drive away bats on lines?
That's a good question. The bats, I'm no expert on bats. We don't see a lot. Obviously, flying and with the line guard device, I don't know that it would. The bat's really small, but I think they want to clamp onto something with their talons. So they're probably going to just hang on the line. What I would recommend, though, is because bats do lay eggs, I believe, well, you know what? I may be wrong. Somebody have to correct me on this. I don't know if a bat is, I think a bat might be a mammal.
It is.
If a bat is a mammal, then it won't work. The bird block material is not effective on mammals. We've tested that and tried that. They just tend to ignore it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't bother them, but they just tend to ignore it. So I would say that bats would be a tough challenge.
Okay. Let's see. Were there any, another question? What is the cost return on investment for these devices?
Oh, I wish I had that number. That would be a wonderful sales and marketing tool. But unfortunately, the utilities are not great about sharing that. I mean, obviously, you can see online, you can buy that line guard device at full retail. Utilities don't pay full retail, but you can buy that device, the line guard device online for $140. If you have an outage, you all know, or many of you know, the actual cost associated with just a single outage. So, that's an easy piece of return on investment to calculate. But unfortunately, you have to have the accountants in the utility tell you that, and they don't like sharing that information with outside third parties. What we do know is for, I don't know, at least 15 years or more, every year, the biggest utilities in the world, like American Electric Power, like Duke Energy, like Entergy on the Gulf Coast, like Ameren in St. Louis, like the list goes on and on and on. All of these major utilities have specified and used line guard year after year after year after year, and they're not replacing old installations. They're adding to lines in service that they're putting line guard and pole guard out there with. So that is what tells us this works, because no one's taken it down or replaced them because they failed. They just keep putting them up. And so it just keeps working more and more.
Okay, great. Good answers. Thanks for the question.